The Three Wishes by William Carleton. In ancient times there lived a man named Billy Dawson, and he was known to be a great rogue. They say he was descended from the family of the Dawsons, which was the reason, I suppose, for him carrying their name upon him. Billy was in his youthful days, and was the best hand at doing nothing in all Europe. Devil and mortal could come next to him in the idleness, and in consequence of his great practice that way, you may be sure that if any man were to make a it by fortune by it, he would have done it. Billy was the only son of his father, barring two daughters, but they have nothing to do with the story I'm telling you. Indeed, it was a kind father and godfather for Billy to be handy at the knavery as well as the idleness, for it was well known that not one of their blood ever did an honest act, except with roguish intention. In short, they were altogether a Dyson connection, and a credit to the name. As for Billy, with all the villainy of his family, both plain and ornamental, came down to him by the way of legacy, for it so happened that the father, in spite of all his cleverness, had nothing but his roguery to leave him. Billy, to do him justice, improved the fortune he got. Every day advanced him farther into dishonesty and poverty until, at the long run, he was acknowledged by on all the hands to be the completest swindler and the poorest vagabond in the whole parish. Billy's father, in his younger days, had often been forced to acknowledge the inconvenience of not having a trade, in consequence of a nice point in law, called the Vagrant Act, that sometimes troubled him. On the account he made up his mind to give Billy an occupation, and accordingly bound him to be a blacksmith. But whether Bill was to live or die by the forgery was a puzzle to his father, though the neighbors said that both was likely. At all events, he was put apprentice to the smith for 7 years, and had a hard card his master had to play in managing him. They took the proper method, however, for Bill was so lazy and roguish that it would vex a saint to keep him in order. Bill, says his master to him one day when he had been sunning himself about the ditches instead of minding his business, Bill, my boy, I'm vexed to the heart to see you in such bad state of health. You're very ill with that complaint about all overness, however, says he. I think I can cure you. Nothing will bring you about but 3 or 4 sound doses every day of a medicine they called the oil of the hazel. Take the first dose now, says he, and immediately banged him with a hazel cudgel until Bill's bones ached for a week afterwards. If you were my son, said his master, I tell you that, as long as I could get a piece of advice growing convenient from the hedges, I'd have you a different youth from what you were. If working was a sin, Bill, not an innocenter boy ever broke bread than you would be. Good people is scarce, you think, but however that may be, I throw it out as a hint that you must take your medicine till you're cured, whenever you happen to get unwell in the same way. From this out he kept Bill's nose to the grinding stone, and whenever he complaint returned, he never failed to give him a hearty dose of his improvement. In the course of time, however, Bill was his own man and his own master. But it would puzzle his saints to know whether the master or the man was more precious youth in the eyes of the world. He immediately married a wife, and devil a doubt of it, But if he kept her in whiskey and sugar, she kept him in hot water. Bill drank and she drank. Bill fought and she fought. Bill was idle and she was idle. Bill whacked her and she whacked Bill. If Bill gave her one black eye, she gave him another, just to keep herself in countenance. Never was there a blessed pair so well met, and a beautiful sight it was to see them both at breakfast time blinking at each other across the potato baskets. Bill with his right eye black, and she with her left. In short, they were the talk of the whole town. And to see Bill of a morning staggering home drunk, his shirt sleeves rolled up on his smutted arms, his breast open in the old tattered leather apron, with one corner tucked underneath his belt, singing one minute and fighting with his wife the next. She, reeling beside him, with a discolored eye and forehead, a dirty ragged cap on one side of her head, and a pair of Bill's old slippers on her feet, a squalling child in her arm, now scuffing and dragging Bill, and again kissing and hugging him. Yes, it was a pleasant picture to see this loving pair in such a state. This might do for a while, but it would not last. They were idle, drunken, and ill-conducted, and it was not to be supposed that they would get a far thing handle from their words. They were of course through the great straits and faith. They soon found that their fighting and drinking and idleness made them to be the laughing sport of the neighbors. But neither brought food to their table to their children, put a coat upon their backs, nor satisfied their landlord when he came to look for his own. Still, the never one of Bill was a funny fellow with strangers, though, as we said, the greatest rogue unhanged. One day he was standing against his own anvil, completely in a brown study, being brought to his wits' end on how to make the breakfast for the family. The wife was scolding and cursing in the house, and the naked creatures of childlike squalling about their knees for food. Bill was fairly at an impasse, and knew not where to or how to turn himself, when the poor withered old beggar came unto the forge, tottering on his staff. A long white beard fell from his chin, and he looked so thin and hungry that you might blow him, one would think, over the house. Bill, at this moment, had been brought to his senses by distress, and his heart had a touch of pity towards the old man, for, on looking at him a second time, he clearly saw starvation and sorrow in his face. "God save you, honest man," said Bill. The old man gave a sigh, and raising himself with great pain on his staff, he looked at Bill in every beseeching way. "Musha, God save you kindly," says he. "Maybe you could give a poor, hungry, helpless old man a mouthful of something to eat. You see yourself I'm not able to work. If I was, I'd sworn to be beholding to anyone." "Faith, honest man," said Bill, "if you knew who you're speaking to, you'd soon ask a monkey for churn staff as me to either mate or money. There's not a blackguard in the three kingdoms so fairly on the shingrad as I am for both one and the other. The wife within is sending the curses thick and heavy on me, and the children's play with a cat's medley to keep her in comfort. Take my word for it, poor man, if I had either mates or money, I'd help you, for I know particularly well what it is to want at the present speaking. An empty sack won't stand, neighbor." So far, Bill told him truth. A good thought was in his heart, because he found himself on a footing with a beggar. And nothing brings down pride or softens a heart like feeling what it is to want. Why, you are in worse state than I am, said the old man. You have a family to provide for, and I have only myself to support. You may kiss the book on that, my old worthy, replied Bill. But come, what I can do for you I will. Plant yourself up here beside the fire, and I'll give you a blast or two of my bellows that will warm the old blood in your body. It's cold, miserable, snowy day, and the good heat will be of service. Thank you kindly, said the old man. I am cold, and a warming at your fire will do me good. Oh, and it is a bitter, bitter day. God bless it. He then sat down, and Bill blew a rousing blast that soon made the stranger edge back from the fire. In a short time he felt quite comfortable, and when the numbness was taken out of his joints, he buttoned up and prepared to depart. Now, says he to Bill, you hadn't the food to feed me, but what you could do, you did. Ask any 3 wishes you choose, and be they what they may. Take my word for it, they shall be granted. Now, the truth is that Bill, though he believed himself a great man in the point of cuteness, wanted, after all, a full quarter of being square, for there is always great difference between a wise man and a knave. Bill was so much of a rogue that he could not, for the blood of him, ask an honest wish, but stood scratching his head in a puzzle. 3 wishes, said he. Well, let me see. Did you say 3? Aye, replied the stranger. 3 wishes. That was what I said. Well, said Bill, here goes. Aha! Let me alone, my old worthy. Faith, I'll overreach the parish if you say what is true. I'll cheat them in dozens, rich and poor, old and young. Let me alone, man. I have it here? And he tapped his forehead with great glee. Faith, you're the sort to meet the frosty morning when a man wants his breakfast. And I'm sorry I have neither money nor credits to get the bottle of whiskey, that we might take our morning together. Well, let us hear the wishes, said the old man. My time is short, and I cannot stay much longer. Do you see the sledgehammer? Said Bill. I wish, in the first place, that whoever takes it up in their hands may never be able to lay it down till I give them leave, and that whoever begins to sledge with it may never stop sledging until it's my pleasure to release him. Secondly, I have an armchair, and I wish that whoever sits down in it may never rise out of it till they have my consent. And thirdly, that whatever money I put into my purse, nobody may have power to take it out but myself. You devil's rip, said the old man in a passion, shaking his staff across Bill's nose. Why did you not ask something that would save you both here and hereafter? Sure, it's a common as the market cross that there's not a vagabond in the Majesty's dominion that stands in more need of both. Oh, by the 11, said Bill, I forgot that altogether. Maybe you'd be civil enough to let me change one of them. The third porter wish was made, then I'll make, if you'll give me another chance. Get out, you reprobate, said the old fellow, still in a passion. Your day of grace is past. Little you knew who was speaking to you all the time. I'm sent Moriki, you blackguard, and I gave you the opportunity of doing something with yourself and your family. But you neglected it, and now your fate is cast. You dirty, bog-trogging profligate. Sure, it's well known that what you are. Aren't you the byword of everybody's mouth? You and your child's, you and your scold of a wife? By this and by that, if you ever happen to come across me again, I'll send you to where you won't freeze, you villain. Ooh. He then gave Bill a rap of his cudgel over the head and laid him in length beside the bellows. Kicked the broken coal scuttle out of the way and left the forge in a fury. When Billy recovered himself from the effects of the blow, he began to think on what happened. He could have quartered himself with vexation for not asking great wealth as one of the wishes at least. But now the die was cast on him, and he could only make the most of the three of that he pitched upon. He now bethought him. Now he might turn to the best account, and here the cunning came to his aid. He began by sending for the wealthiest neighbors to pretence of business, and when they got them under the roof, he offered them an armchair to sit down in. He now had them safe, nor could all the arts of man relieve them except Worthy Bill was willing. Bill's plan was to make the best bargain he could before releasing his prisoners, and let him alone for knowing how to make their purses bleed. There wasn't a wealthy man in the country he did not fleece. The parson of the parish bled heavily, so did the lawyer and the rich attorney, for who had returned from practice swore that the court of chancery itself was paradise compared to Bill's chair. This was all very good for a time. The fame came of the chair, however, soon spread, and so did that of his sledge. In a short time neither man, woman, nor child would darken his door, all avoiding him and his fixtures as they would a spring gun or main trap. Bill, so long as he fleeced his neighbors, never wrought a hand's turn, so that when his money was out, he found himself as badly off as ever. In addition to all this, his character was 50 times worse than before, for it was the general belief that he had dealings with the old boy. Nothing now could exceed his misery, distress, or ill tempers. His wife and he and their children had fought among one another. Everybody hated them, cursed them, and avoided them. The people thought they were acquainted with more than Christian people ought to know. This, of course, came to Bill's ears, and it vexed him very much. One day he was walking out in the fields and thinking of how he could raise the wind once more. The day was dark, and he found himself, before he stopped, and in the bottom of a lovely glen covered in great bushes that grew on either side. Well, thought he, when every other means of raising money failed him, it's reported that I'm in the league with the old boy, and it's a folly to have the connection without the profit. I'm ready to make a bargain with him any day, so, said he, raising his voice, Nick, you sinner, if you be convened and willing, why stand out here? Show your best leg, and here's your man. The words were hardly out of his mouth when the dark, sober-looking old gentleman, not unlike the lawyer, walked up to him. Bill looked at the foot and saw the hoof. "Morrow, Nick," said Bill. "Morrow, Bill," said Nick. "Well, Bill, what's the news?" "Devil, much I myself hears of late," says Bill. "There is anything fresh below?" "I can't exactly say, Bill. I spend a little of my time down now. The Tories are in office, and my hands are consequently too full of business here to pay much attention to anything else." "A fine plan this, sir," says Bill, "to take a constitutional walk in. When I want an appetite, I often come this way. High feeding is very bad without exercise." "High feeding? Come, Bill, you know you didn't waste a morsel of these 24 hours." "You know, that's a bounce, Nick. I eat the breakfast in the morning and put a stone of flesh on my... I eat a breakfast this morning that would put a stone of flesh on you, if only you smelt it. No matter, this is not the purpose. What's that you were muttering to yourself ago? If you want to come to be brunt, I'm here for you. Nick, said Bill, you contemplate. You want nothing bearing a pair of O'Brien O'Leary's breeches. Bill, in fact, was bent on making the companion open to the bargain, because he had often heard that in case, with proper care on his own part, he might defeat him in the long run. The other, however, was his match. What was this nature of Brian's garment? Inquired Nick. You know the song, said Bill. Now, Brian O'Lynn had no breeches to wear, so he got a sheepskin and made him a pair. With the fleshy side out and the woolly side in, there'll be a pleasant and cool, says Brian O'Lynn. A cool pair would serve you, Nick. You're mighty waggish today, Mr. Dawson. A good right I have, said Bill. I'm a man snug and well-to-do in the world, have lots of money and plenty of good eating and drinking, and what more need a man to wish for? True, said the other. In the meantime, it's rather odd that so respectable a man should not have 6 inches of unbroken cloth in his apparel. You are as naked as a tattered Nemalian as I ever laid my eyes on. In a full dress, you're a party for scarecrows, William. That's my own fancy, Nick. I don't work in my trade like a gentleman. This is my forge dress, you know. Well, but what did you summon me here for? Said the other. You may as well speak out, I tell you, for, my good friend, unless you do, I shan't smell that. I smell more than that, said Bill. And by the way, I think you give me the windy side of you. Curse old sulphur, I say. There, that's what I call an improvement in my condition. But as you are so stiff, says Bill, why, the short and the long of it is that ham you see there, sure you know I have a thriving little trade of my own, and that if I needn't be a loss. But in the meantime, I'd rather in a kind of so-so, don't you take? Bill winked knowingly, hoping the trick on him would be the first proposal. You must speak above board, my friend, says the other. I'm a man of few words, blunt and honest. If you have anything to say, be plain. Don't think I can be losing my time with such a pitiful rascal as you are. Well, said Bill, I want money then. I'm ready to come into terms. What do you say to that, Nick? Let me see. Let me look at you, says his companion, turning to him. Now, Bill, in the first place, you're not as finished a scarecrow as ever stood upon 2 legs. I play second fiddle to you there again, says Bill. There you stand with the blackguard's coat of arms quartered under your eye, and don't make little blackguards, says Bill, nor speak despairingly of your own crest. Why, what would you bring, you brazen rascal, if you were fairly put up in the auction? Faith, I'd bring more bidders than you would, said Bill, if you were to go off to auction tomorrow. I tell you they should bid downwards to come to your value, Nicholas. We have no coins small enough to purchase you. Well, no matter, said Nick. If you are willing to be mine at the expiration of 7 years, I will give you more money than ever the rascal breed of you was worth. Done, said Bill, with no disparagement to my family in the meantime. So down with the hard cash, don't be a nagger. The money was accordingly paid down, but as nobody was present except the giver and the receiver, the amount of what Bill got was never known. Won't you give me a luck penny? Said the old gentleman. Tut, said Billy. No prosperous old fellow, you cannot want it. However, bad luck to you, with all my heart, and it's rubbing grease on a fat pig to say so. Be off now, or I'll commit suicide on you. Your absence is a cordial to most people, you infernal old profligate. You have injured my morals enough, even for the short time you have been with me, for I don't find myself as virtuous as you. Is that your gratitude, Billy? Is it gratitude speak of you, man? I wonder you don't blush when you name it. However, when you come again, if you bring a third eye on your head, you will see that I'm Maine. Nicholas, a harder. The old gentleman, as Bill spoke, hopped across the ditch and on his way to Downing Street, where of late 'tis thought he possesses much influence. Bill now began by degrees to show off, but still wrought a little of his trade to blindfold neighbors. In a very short time, however, he became a great man. So long needed as he was a poor rascal, no decent person would speak to him. Even as the proud serving men of the big house would turn up at their noses at him. And he well deceived to be made little of by others, because he was mean enough to make little of himself. But when it was seen and shown that he had oceans of money, it was wonderful to think, although he was new and a greater blackguard than ever, how those who despised him before began to come around to him and court his company. Bill, however, had neither sense nor spirit to make of those sunshiny friends know their distance. Not he. Instead of that, he was proud to be seen in decent company, and so long as the money lasted, it was "Hail, fellow, well met," between himself and every fair-faced sponger who had a horse under him, a decent coat on his back, and a good appetite to eat his dinners. With riches and all, Bill was the same man still, but somehow or another, there's a great difference between a rich profligate and a poor one, and Bill found it so in its cost in both cases. For half of the 7 years had passed, Bill had his carriage, his equipages, his hand and glove with Lord this and with Lord that, kept hounds and hunters, and was the first sportsman of the Curragh. Patronizing every boxing ruffian he could pick up, and betted night and day on cards, dice, and horses. Bill, in short, should be a blood, and except he did all this, and he could not presume to mingle with the fashionable bloods of his time. It's an old proverb, however, that what is got over the devil's back is sure to go off under it, and in Bill's case has proved true. In short, the old boy himself could not supply him with the money so fast as he made it fly, and it was easy come, easy go with Bill, and no sign was on it before he came within 2 years of the time he found the purse empty. And now came the value of his summer friends to be known. When it was discovered that the cash was no longer flesh about him, that stud with the carriage and the hounds was going to the hammer. Wish. Off they went, friends, relations, pot companions, dinner eaters, blacklegs, and all, like a flock of crows that had smelt gunpowder. Down Bill went, soon week after week and day after day, until at last he was obliged to put on a leather apron and take up the hammer again. And not only that, for as no experience could make him wise, for once more began his taproom brawls, quarrels with Judy, and took his high feeding on the dry potatoes and salt. Now, too, came those cutting tongues of all that knew him, like razors upon him. Those that he had scorned because they were poor and himself rich, now paid him back with his own interest. and those he measured himself with, because they were rich, and only who countenanced him in consequence of his wealth, gave him the hardest word on their cheeks. The devil mend him, he deserved it all, and more if he got it. Bill, however, who was the hardened sinner, never fretted himself down an ounce of flesh by what was said to him or of him. Not he. He cursed and fought and swore and schemed away as usual, taking in everyone he could, and surely none could match him at villainy of all sorts and sizes. At last the 7 years became expired, and Bill was one morning sitting at his forge, sober and hungry, his wife cursing him and the child squealing, and as before he was thinking about how he might defraud some honest neighbor out of breakfast to stop their mouths and his too, when who walks in on him but old Nick to demand his bargain. "Morrow, Bill," he said with a sneer. "The devil himself welcomes you," says Bill, "but you have a fresh memory." "A bargain's a bargain between two honest men any day," says Satan. "When I speak of honest men, I mean yourself and me, Bill." And he put his tongue in his cheek and made game of the unfortunate rogue he had come for. "Nick, my worthy fellow," said Bill, "have bowels. You shouldn't do a shabby thing. You shouldn't have to disgrace your own character by putting more weight upon a falling man. You know what it is to get a come down yourself, so worthy just to keep your toe on the pump, and walk off with yourself and someone else. A cool walk will save you from better than my companion, Nicholas." "Bill, it's no use shirking," said his friend. "Your swindling tricks may enable you to cheat others, but you won't cheat me, I guess. You want nothing to make you perfect in your way but to travel, and travel you shall under my guidance, Billy. No, no, I'm not to be swindled by a good fellow. I have a rather better opinion of myself, Mr. D, than to think that you could outwit Nicholas Clutie, Esquire. "You may sneer, you sinner," replied Bill, "but I tell you I have outwitted men who could buy and sell you to your face. To spare you, villain, when I tell you that no attorney could stand before me." Satan's countenance got blank when he heard that. He wriggled and fidgeted about, and then appeared to be not quite comfortable. "In that case, then," he said, "the sooner I deceive you the better, so to turn you for the Low Countries." "Is it to come to that in earnest?" said Bill, "and are you going to act as a rascal as the long run?" "'Pon honor, Bill." "Have patience, then, you sinner, till I finish this horseshoe. It's the last of a set I've finishing, and for one of your friend, the attorney's horses. And here, Nick, I hate idleness. You know it's the mother of mischief. Take the sledgehammer and have it a dozen strokes or so, till I get it out of your hands. And then there's with you, since it must be so." He then gave the bellows a puff that blew half a peck of dust at Clubfoot's face, whipped out the red-hot iron, and set Satan sledging away for the bare life. "Faith," says Bill to him, when the shoe was finished, "it's a thousand pities over the sledge that should be out of your hand. And great Spargow was a child to you at sledging. You're such an able tyke. Now just exercise yourself till I bid the wife and child goodbye, then I'm off." Out went Bill, of course, without the slightest notion of coming back. No more than Nick had that he could be give a sledging. Indeed, neither could be true, but was forced to work away if all he was sledging for a wager. This was just what Bill wanted. He was now compelled to sledge on until it was Bill's pleasure to release him, and so we leave him very industriously employed, while we took after the worthy who outwitted him. In the meantime, Bill broke cover and took to country at large, wrought a little journey work wherever he could, and in this way went from one place to another till the course of a month. He walked back very coolly to his own forge to see how things went in his absence. There he found Satan in a rage, perspiration pouring out of him, torrents, hammering with a might and main on the marked anvil. Bill calmly leaned his back against the wall, placed his hat upon the side of his head, put his hands into his breech pockets, and began to whistle Sean Scott's hornpipe. At length, he says in a very quiet, good-humored way, "Morrow, Nick." "Oh," says Nick, still hammering away. "Oh, you double-disdained villain. May the most refined, ornamental, double-rectified, super-extra, and original collection of curses that ever be gathered into a single nosegay of ill fortune shine on the buttonhole of your conscience while your while your name is Bill Dawson. I denounce you, a double-milled villain, a finished pot-pressed knave, in comparison of all the other knaves I never knew, attorneys included, are honest men. I brand you as a pearl of cheats, a tip-top taken. I denounce you, I say again, for the villainous treatment I received at your hands for this most untoward and unfortunate transaction between us. For unfortunate in every sense is he that has anything to do with this, such as a prime and finished impostor." "You're very warm, Nicky," says Bill. "What puts you into a passion, you old sinner?" "Sure, if it's your own will and pleasure to take exercise in my angel, and not to be abused for it. Upon my credit, Nicky, you ought to blush for using such blackguard languages, so unbecoming of your grain of character. You cannot say that it was set hammering an empty anvil, you profligate. However, as you are so industrious, I simply say it would take 1,000 pities to take it away from you. Nick, I love industry in my heart, and I've always to encourage it. You work away, it's not often you spend your time so creditably. I'm afraid if you weren't at that, you'd be worse employed." "Bill have bowels," said the operative. "You wouldn't go to lay more weight on the falling man, you know. You wouldn't disgrace your character by such a piece of iniquity, by keeping an offensive gentleman, advanced in years, in such unbecoming and rascally job as this. Generosity's your top virtue, Bill. But not that you have any other excellent ones, as well as that, among which, as you say yourself, I reckon industry. But still in its generosity you shine. Come, Bill, honor bright, and release me." "Name your terms, you profligate." "You're above terms, William. A generous fellow like you never thinks of terms." "Goodbye, old gentleman," said Bill, very coolly. "I'll drop in to see you once a month." "No, no, Bill, you you excellent, worthy, delightful fellow. Not so fast, not so fast. Come, name your terms, you slint. My dear Bill, name your terms." "7 years more." "I agree, but—" "And the same supply of cash as before, down on the nail here." "Very good, very good. You're rather simple, Bill. Rather soft, I must confess. Well, no matter. I shall yet return to the tab. You are an exceedingly simple fellow, Bill. Still, there will come a day, my dear Bill, there will come—" "Do you grumble, you vagrant? Another word and I double your terms." You grumble, you vagrant. In other words, Mum, William, Mum. Tas is Latin for candle. 7 years more of grace and the same measure of the needful that I got before. Aye or no? Of course, Bill. Aye, say. There's the cash. Accept the terms. Oh, blood, the rascal of grace, Bill. Now drop the hammer and vanish, says Bill. But what would you think to take the sledge while you stay and give me a... Why in such a hurry? He added, seeing that Satan withdraw the double nick of time. Why in such a hurry? He added, seeing Satan withdraw the double nick of time. Hello, Nicholas, he shouted. Come back, you forgot something. And when the old gentleman looked back behind him, Billy shook the hammer at him, on which he vanished altogether. Billy now got onto his old courses, and what shows the kind people of the world made of, he also took up his old company. When they saw that he had money once more, and was sowing it about him in all directions, they immediately began to find excuses of his former extravagance. Say what you will, said one, Bill Dawson's a spirited fellow, and bleeds like a prince. He's a hospitable man of his own house, or out of it, as ever lived, said another. His only fault is, observed another, that he is, if anything, too generous, and doesn't know the value of money. His fault's on the right side, however. He has a spunk in him, says the fourth. Keeps a capital table, prime wines, and standing welcome with his friends. Why, said a fifth, if he doesn't enjoy his money when he lives, he won't when he's dead. So more power to him, and a wider throat to his purse. If he doesn't enjoy his money when he lives, he won't when he's dead. So more power to him, and a wider throat. Indeed, the very persons who were cramming themselves at his expense despised him at heart. They knew very well, however, how to take him on the weak side. Praise his generosity, and he would do anything. Call him a man of spirit, and he would fleece them to his face. Sometimes he would toss a purse of guineas to a knave, another to that flatterer, third to a bully, and the fourth to some broken-down rake. And all to convince him that he was a sterling friend, a man of mettle and liberality. But never was he known to help a victorious or struggling family, to assist the widow or the fatherless, or to do any other act that was truly useful. It is to be supposed the reason of this was that he spent it, as most of the world do, in service of the devil, and by whose aid he got it. He was prevented by turning it to a good account. Between you and me, dear reader, there are more persons acting after Bill's fashion in the same world than you dreamt of. When his money was out again, his friends played him the same rascally game once again. No sooner did his poverty become plain than the knaves began to be troubled with small fits of modesty, such as an unwillingness to come into his place when there was no longer anything to be got out of there. A kind of virgin bashfulness prevented them from speaking to him when they saw him getting out on the wrong side of his clothes. Many of them would turn away from him in the prettiest and most delicate manner when they thought he wanted to borrow money from them, all for fear of putting him to blush by asking it. Others again, when they saw him coming towards the house about dinner time, would become so confused from mere gratitude as to think themselves from another place. And their servants, seized as it were, the same feeling would tell Bill that their masters were not at home. At length, after traveling the same villainous round as before, Bill was compelled to betake himself, at the last remedy, to the forge. In other words, he found that there is, after all, nothing in the world that a man can rely on so firmly and surely as his own industry. Bill, however, wanted the organ of common sense, for his experience, and it was sharp enough to leave an impression, ran off him like water off a duck. He took to his employment sorely against his grain, and now he had no choice. You must either work or starve, and starvation was like great doctor. Nobody tries it until the other remedies fail them. Bill had been twice rich, twice a gentleman among blackguards, and always a blackguard among gentlemen, for no wealth or acquaintance with decent society would rub the rust off his native vulgarity off of him. He was now common blinking sod at his forge, a drunken bully in the tap room, cursing and browbeating everyone as well as his wife, boasting of how much money he spent on his day, swaggering about the high doings he carried on, telling stories about himself and Lord the Covenant, the dinners he gave, how much it cost him, attempting to extort credit upon the strength of the former wealth. He was too ignorant, however, to know that he was publishing his own disgrace, and that it was a mean-spirited thing to be proud of what ought to make him blush through a deal board 9 inches thick. He was one morning industriously engaged in a quarrel with his wife, who, with a 3-legged stool in her hand, appeared to mistake his head for his own anvil. In the meantime, he paid addresses to her about apron, then who steps to jog his memory of the little agreement that was between them, but old Nick. The wife, it seems, in spite of all her exertions to the contrary, was getting the worst of it, and Sir Nicholas, willing to appear a gentleman of great gallantry, thought he could not do less than to take up a lady's quarrel, particularly as Bill had laid her in a sleeping posture. Now Satan thought this too bad, and he felt himself under many obligations to the sex. He determined to defend one of them to the present occasion, so as Judy rose, he turned upon the husband, and floored him with a clever facer. "You unmanly villain," said he, "is this the way you treat your wife? Upon honor, Bill, I'll chastise you on the spot. I cannot stand by, a spectator of such ungentlemanly conduct without giving up all claim to gallant." Whack! The word was divided by his mouth by a blow of the churnstaff from Judy, who no sooner saw Bill struck than she nailed Satan, who fell once more. "What, you villain? That's for striking my husband like a murderer behind his back," said Judy, and she suited across the action of the word. "That's for interfering between a man and wife. What, you murder the poor man before my face, eh? If he baits me, you shabby dog, who is the baiter right? I'm sure it's nothing out of your pocket. Must you have your finger in every pie?" This was anything but idle talk, for at every word she gave him a resemblance hot and heavy. Nicholas backed, danced, and hopped. She advanced, still drubbing him with a great perseverance, till at length he fell into the redoubtable armchair, which stood exactly behind him. Bill, who had been putting in 2 blows for Judy's one, seeing that his enemy was safe, now got between the devil and his wife, a situation that few will be disposed to envy him. "Tenderness, Judy," said the husband. "I hate cruelty. Go put the tongs in the fire and make them red hot. Nicholas, you have a nose," he said. Satan began to rise, but rather surprised to find that he could not budge. "Nicholas," says Bill, "how is your pulse? You don't look well. That is to say, you look worse than usual." Another attempted rise, but found it a mistake. "Thank you for coming along," said Bill. "I have a fancy to travel under your guidance, and we'll take the Low Countries in your way, won't we? Get to your legs, you sinner. You know a bargain's a bargain between 2 honest men. Nicholas," meaning you and yourself. "Judy, are the tongs hot?" Satan's face was worth looking at. as he turned his eyes from the husband to wife and then fastened them with the tongs, now turning a furnace heat on the fire, conscious at the same time that he could not move out of the chair. "Billy," he said, "you won't forget that I rewarded you won't forget that I rewarded your generosity last time I saw you in the way of business. Faith, Nicholas, it fails me to remember any generosity I ever showed you. Don't be womanish. I simply want to see what kind of stuff your nose is made out of. Whether it will stretch like a rogue's conscience. If it does, we'll flatter it up the flatter it up the chimney with the red-hot tongs. And when this old hat is fixed on the top of it, let alone for the weathercock. You have a fellow feeling, Mr. Dawson. You know we ought not to dispute. Drop the matter, and I will give you your next 7 years. We know all that, says Billy, opening the red-hot tongs very coolly. Mr. Dawson, said Satan, if you cannot remember my friendship to yourself, don't forget how often I stood your father's friend, your grandfather's friend, and the friend of all your relations up to the 10th generation. I intended also to stand by your children after you, so long as you named Dawson. And a respectable one it is, might last. Don't be blushing, Nick, says Bill. You're too modest. That was ever your failing. Hold up your head. There's money bid for you. I'll give you such a nose, my good friend, that you will have to keep an outrider before you, to carry the end of it off his shoulder. Mr. Dawson, I pledge my honor to raise your children to the end as high as they can go, no matter whether they desire it or not. That's very kind of you, says the other. And I'll do as much for your nose. He gripped it as he spoke, and the old boy immediately sung out. Bill pulled, and the nose went with him like a piece of warm wax. He then transferred the tongs to Judy, got a ladder, and resumed the tongs. Ascended the chimney and tugged steadily at the nose until he got 5 feet above the roof, and then fixed the hat upon it. Came down. There's a weathercock, said Billy. I defy Ireland to show as much of beauty. Faith, Nick, it makes the prettiest steeple of a church in all of Europe. That old hat fits it like a shaving. In this state, with his nose twisted up the chimney, Satan sat down some time, experiencing the novelty of what might be termed a particular sensation. At last the worthy husband and wife went to relent. I think, said Bill, that we have made the most of the nose, as well as the joke. I believe, Judy, it's long enough. What is, says Judy. Why, the joke. Faith, and I think so is his nose, said Judy. What do you say yourself, Satan? Nothing at all, Bill, said the other. But that's a good joke. An excellent joke, and a goodly nose, too, as it stands. You're always a gentlemanly man, Bill, and did things with grace. Still, I might have opinion of such a trifle. It's no trifle at all, says Bill. If you spake the nose, very well, it is not, says the other. Still, both the joke and the nose without further violence. Would you lay me under very heavy obligation, which I shall be ready to acknowledge and repay as I thought? Said Bill. Shall it once more and be off for 7 years. As much as you came down the last time, and vanish. The words were scarcely spoken when the money was at his feet and Satan invisible. Nothing could surpass the mirth of Bill and his wife at the result of the adventure. They laughed till they were down on the floor. It is useless to go over the same ground again. Bill was still incorrigible. The money went as the devil's money always does. Bill caroused and squandered and could never turn a penny of it to a good purpose. In this way, year after year went, till the 7th was closed, and Bill's hour came. He was now, and had been for some time past, as miserable as knave as ever. Not a shilling had he, nor a shilling's worth, with the exception of his forge, his cabin, and a few articles of crazy furniture. It was in this state he was standing with furniture as before, straining his ingenuity how to make a break fast, when Satan came to look after him. The old gentleman was sorely puzzled how to get at him. He kept sulking and sneaking at the forge for some time until he saw Bill hadn't come across to bless himself with. He immediately charged himself into a guinea and lay into the open field where he knew Bill would see him. If, said he, I get into the position, I can manage him. The honest smith took the bait, for it was well gilded, and clutched the guinea into his purse and closed it up. Oh, shouted the devil out of the purse. You're caught, Bill, and I've secured you at last, you knave, you. Why don't you despair, you villain, and when you think of what's before you? Why, you unlucky old dog, said Bill. Is it you in there? Will you always drive your head into every loophole that's set for you? Nick, faith of God, I never had you bagged till now. Satan then began to tug and struggle within view of trying to get out of the purse, but in vain. Mr. Dawson, he said, we understand each other. I'll give you 7 years additional and the cash on the nail. But Isaac Nicholas, you know the weight of the hammer, that's enough. It's not a whipping of feathers that you're going to get, or anyhow. Just be easy. Mr. Dawson, I grant I'm not your match. Release me, and I'll double the cash. I was merely trying your temper when I took the shape of a guinea. Faith, and I'll try yours before you have it. I've a notion. He immediately commenced with the sledge, and Satan rang out with a considerable want of firmness. Am I heavy enough? Said Bill. Lighter, William, if you love me. I haven't been latterly, Mr. Dawson. I have been delicate. My health, in short, is a very precarious state, Mr. Dawson. I can believe that, said Bill. And it will be more so when I'm done with you. Am I doing it right? Bill, said Nick, is this gentlemanly treatment of your own respectable shop? Do you think if you dropped into a little place that I'd actually rascally part towards you? Have you no compunction? I know, replied Bill, sledging away at the vehemence, that you're notorious for giving your friends warm welcome. Devil and old youth more so. But you have been dealing in bad coin, must you? However, good or bad, you're in for a sweat now, you sinner. Am I doing it purty? Lovely, William, but, if possible, a little more delicate. Oh, how delicate you are. Maybe a cup of tea would save you. Or a little small gruel to compose your stomach. Mr. Dawson, said the gentleman in the purse, hold your hand and let us understand one another. I have a proposal to make. You're the sinner anyhow, said the wife. Name your own sum, said Satan. Only set me free. No, a sorrow may take the toe, you'll budge till you let off a bill, said the wife. Hold him hard, Bill. Barney sets you clear of your engagement. There it is, my posy, said Bill. That's the condition. If you don't give up yours at once, you must double the cash you gave last time, so. And if you're of that option, say a leave the cash and be off. The money again appeared with the glittering heap before Bill, which. Then he exclaimed, "Thy has it, you dog. Take your poor pumps now. Fair weather to you, you vagrant. But Nicholas, Nick, here. The other looked back and saw Bill, a broad grin upon him, shaking his purse at him. Nicholas, come back. I'm short a guinea. Nick shook his fist and disappeared. It would be useless to stop now, merely to inform our readers that Bill was beyond improvement. In short, he once more took to his old habits and lived exactly the same manner as before. He had 2 sons, one a great blackguard as himself, who was also named after him. The other was well-conditioned, virtuous young man named James, who left his father, having relied upon his own industry and honest perseverance in life. Arrived afterwards to great wealth and built a town called Castle Dawson, which is also called from its founder until this day. Bill, at length, in spite of all of his wealth, was obliged, as he himself said, to travel, to the other words. He fell asleep one day and forgot to awaken, and in plainer terms, he died. Now, it is usual when a man dies to close the history of his life and adventures at once, but with our hero this cannot be the case. The moment Bill departed, he very unnaturally bent his steps towards the residence of St. Morsky, as being, in his opinion, likely to lead him towards the snuggest berth he could readily make out. On arriving, he gave a humble kind of knock, and St. Morsky opened. God save your reverence, said Bill, very submissively. Be off. There's no admittance here for so poor a youth as you are, said St. Morsky. He was now so cold and fatigued that he cared little for where he went, provided only that he said himself, he could rest his bones, get the air out of the fire. According to arriving at the large black gates, he knocked, as before, and was told he would get instant admittance the moment he gave his name. Bill Dawson, he replied. Off instantly, said the porter to his companions. Let his majesty know that the rascal he dreads so much is here at the gate. Such a racket and tumult were never heard as the very mention of Billy Dawson created. In the meantime, his old acquaintance came running towards the gate with such haste and consternation that his tail several times nearly tripped on his heels. Don't admit that rascal, he shouted. Bar the gates, make every chain and lock and bolt fast. I won't be safe, and I won't stay here long. Nor none of us need stay here if he gets in. My bones are sore yet after him. No, no, begone, you villain. You'll get no entrance here. I know you too well. Bill could not help giving a broad, malicious grin at Satan, and pulling his nose through the gate bars, he exclaimed, Ha, you old dog! I have you afraid of me at last, have I? He had scarcely uttered the words when his foe, who stood inside, instantly tweaked him by the nose, and Bill felt as though he had been gripped by the same red-hot tongs in which he himself had previously tweaked the nose of Nicholas. Bill then departed, but soon found that in consequence of the inflammable materials for which his strong drink had burned to his nose, the organ immediately took fire, and indeed, to tell the truth, kept burning night and day, summer and winter, without ever once going out. From that hour to this. Such was the sad fate of Billy Dawson, who has been walking without stop or stay from place to place ever since, and in consequence of the flame on his nose, his beard being tangled like a wisp of hay, he had been christened by the country folk as O the Wisp. While, as it were, to show the mischief of his disposition, the circulating knave, knowing that he must seek out the coldest bogs and quagmires in order to cool his nose, seizes upon that ordinary of misleading and unthinking and tipsy night travellers from their way, just that he might have the satisfaction of still taking in as many as possible.